Hi, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you can see my screen okay, and so that should be telling you about interiors at Middlesex, and you can see at the top of the screen there's our hashtag interiors Middlesex, so that will take you to our Instagram if you actually want to follow us, find out anything more about our courses after we've been talking to you today. The title of this presentation is People and Places. That's fundamentally because that is what interiors is about at Middlesex. And presumably you're kind of tuning in here today because you kind of want to know a little bit more of what's involved if you want to go and study interiors at university and the type of, course things that you would be doing on the course, the type of skill base that you might need to be on this course. So that's really what we're going to be trying to show you in this talk today. Um, Fundamentally, Ben and myself teach first year on the interiors at Middlesex, so we will be focusing on what you would all learn within that time. So a lot of our talk will show you all of the information that you would and the learning experience that you would go through if you chose to join us at Middlesex for interiors within that. On this first page, you can see that the key thing that we're always about is people. Um, there's often this misunderstanding about the title of what interiors is actually about. People tend to think, is interiors about decorating spaces? Is it about choosing colors and choosing materials or textures for a space? Fundamentally, it's about people. It's actually about designing for people, designing future spaces for the way that people are going to work, for the way that people are going to live, and for the way that they're going to inhabit, whether it's hospitals, schools, domestic spaces. We've just been talking about how offices are going to be changing. So it's fundamentally operating from people out. That's always our key thing within that. This just gives you a sort of indication of the sort of type of staffing that you will actually have, the number of people that we would be having looking after you within your first year. We're a really big team. We put a lot of emphasis on first year staff because that's that critical transition from whether or not you've been on a previous course, whether you're a mature student or that you're joining us from school. First year is this really big shift. It's your shift into being an independent learner. So within that time, we really offer a huge amount of scaffolding and support from our team. So you can see there's a lot of people here that we're actually showing you. There's Ben and myself, then we also have visiting lecturers, we have graduate academic assistants who are people that actually will be with you full time and are always there for you to call on if you get stuck on anything or you feel a bit lost with anything within the program. And we also have student learning assistants, which is something that's very particular to Middlesex, which are students that have actually studied with us previously in the year previous. So they'll have real understanding of what you're tackling. So it provides this many layered sort of learning experience, which is something that we're really super hot on within it. Throughout this presentation, because it's focusing specifically on first year, I thought that you wouldn't just want my words or Ben's words, because as academics, we have a way of talking about things and talking about what the curriculum is and what the program of study is. But I also thought it would be great for you to be able to hear directly from some students today. So I've included in my presentation, certain quotes where I just actually wrote to our first years and said, what would you like to say to anybody joining the course? What do you think it's important for them to know? And so let's just have a little look at this quote. So they're talking here specifically about this course, and it's taught me, it's lots of full of new and fun experiences. Experiences such as experimenting with my creativity by using new and different types of materials to create structures, expanding my knowledge with technical skills by learning new software and having genuine and continuous support from tutors and LA students throughout our most difficult moments. This course has continually pushed me to be more confident and expressive, as well as enjoying each and every moment and processes of the projects. So that's already given you a bit of a hint about how we actually operate within the first year. And that's about the fact that we will be taking you through many different new skill bases, which Ben will actually be giving you a little bit more detail about later. And we operate the year through lots of different projects. Initially, the projects might be really short, but then they build to much more complicated, much more demanding projects. And so the next presentation wants to kind of give you a flavor of that. But this first image is just to really communicate the essence of what we're about. And it's about dreaming. It's about looking forward to the future, about what new spaces might be, what new experiences of actually how interiors can actually be within that. So we're always coming down to people. Actually, what it feels like to be a human being within a space and standing in that space and experiencing that space. We use that word experience continually. It's coming down to those moments of intimacy. So we put a lot of emphasis in terms of three-dimensional model making, because we kind of think that's the really best way for students to imagine what's possible, to explore what different materials, what different lighting conditions might actually feel like. What do these two people feel like within this space? What opportunities does that actually represent? And we always start from the threshold. By the threshold, we always mean the point where you enter into a space, because in many ways, that's when your journey of going into a space, that difference from the outside to the interior, actually really begins to start. So we begin to explore how we can articulate that, how we can sculpt that space, whether we're compressing that space, whether we're expanding space, using different lighting conditions, using different materials to create different emotional responses to that journey and to that experience of walking through into a space within that. We use a whole range of materials. In order to do that, we're really experimental. We get students to be very hands-on. We actually like to be really playful and exploratory, because we don't really want you to sort of rely just on what you know when you actually start the course. We want you to imagine new possibilities of experience. What would it actually feel like to be this person within this space, with this sort of vegetation growing within that? Within that, inevitably, we're looking to new materials. We're following developments in materials in terms of sustainability. There's been a lot of interesting in actually growing from mushrooms, of all things, actually using mushrooms as a material to create structures in interiors. So we follow what's actually happening within practice, within the press, within developments, and actually bring all of that information into the studio, and then find ways in which students could begin to explore that for themselves. They're obviously not growing mushrooms here, but they're finding other materials that might enable them to sort of test that and emulate that experience. It's key that we always put that figure there, because we're wanting you to actually have a sense of empathy for people. We're thinking of the psychology of spaces. Psychology is super important to interiors. If you're studying that at A level, it makes a really natural transition into actually these disciplines, because there's a lot of analysis and questioning and actually trying to interpret that sort of geography of the interior volumes and spaces within something. Within this model making, we work through a variety of different scales, looking to put different surface textures, different lighting conditions, different volumes, different qualities within this space, trying to then actually analyze these qualities. You can see here we encourage students to actually analyze, look at what they've actually achieved and try and put key words against that. So this idea of analysis, of questioning and being super curious about what it might be like to be that person within this magnificent volume of a space is something that's super important to us. Get students, we've got amazing workshops at Material Middlesex. It's something that we're really well known about. If you're really interested to look at them, there's lots of information on YouTube. You can probably tap into little videos that will take you almost on walkthroughs through the workshops, but I can assure you they are fantastic. So part of what we do in first year is to get students into the workshops, whether that's plaster workshops, so that you're beginning to sculpting potential of dealing with space, not only in a sort of linear format, but in a sense of volume and mass, translating those plaster iterations through into concrete, different qualities within concrete, because we all know that concrete is a key material within the building industry, but it behaves quite, in quite a particular way. So we encourage students to experience these types of qualities firsthand. So you're not kind of just learning through lectures and through talks or through presentations, but you're kind of learning through your fingertips. Because we respect everybody learns in different ways. For some of you, you'll be learning through the delivered lecture. Other people, they kind of learn through a much more instinctive and intuitive way, thinking their way through the materials. And that's something we all really respect at Middlesex. It's not necessary, we kind of want to celebrate the individual. The last thing we're wanting to do is to push you through a machine so that you kind of turn out all the same. We respect the fact that as members of staff, we're all super different, as you'll experience when you hear Ben talking. And it's about our differences. It's about that sense of diversity and inclusion of different people, of different ages, of different cultures, different backgrounds, different memories, different associations, and different rituals that are important to the way that we actually make spaces meaningful to individuals. Key thing is that we try to include within first year a full-size project where you get to actually build a space that has real people in it, not just the tiny models, but that you actually get to construct full-size events. This was a collaboration with the BA dance students. It was actually putting on a live performance. So in many ways, the dance students became our clients in a way. It was almost mimicking the sort of professional practice, that relationship between client who has one set of objectives and designer who is in many ways responding to those objectives, but at the same time, challenging them, questioning them, and actually coming up with new propositions, new proposals. And so this is a fantastic way. There's an amazing moment that when you've built something full size and you kind of stand back as the designer, and then you see it populated. You see people interacting with your designs, which is a fantastic moment. But obviously we can't always build that. That's the key thing with being an interior designer, is that you're not on site actually doing the building. You're needing to communicate your ideas. You're needing to communicate your ideas to your sponsor or to your client or whoever's actually kind of funding the project. You're also needing to communicate your ideas to contractors, electricians, builders, engineers who will be actually developing your ideas on site. So communication is absolutely key to what we do. And again, within that, we give you lots of different skills. Ben will be demonstrating very specifically, but lots of skills in ways in which you can begin to communicate your ideas. A lot of the time we do use working in 3 dimensions. Here you can see the idea of almost just looking at a very intimate detail and a little moment of actually displaying an object that might be, for example, within an exhibition or within a shop or with a retail outlet, where you're looking at how can I make that object that I'm displaying be looking really fantastic, looking super special, because that's kind of our job. If we're designing a shop, it's to actually say, we're taking your product and making it look fantastic. But sometimes those moments, those intimate moments, are actually about actually how one person relates to a space. And so we give you really simple sort of strategies and techniques for you to begin to explore those ideas in a very simple way, so that you can begin to test out, what does it feel like to be in this studio? This was the design for a printmaker studio. Part of the key element was actually including within that space, obviously the tools of the printmaker, but part of it was also the rituals of that printmaker. Part of his key thing was wanting to stand back and take time and look at his work. So that's a key element to begin to give you those sort of ideas. Here we're looking at another sort of quote from a student. This student, Ivana's just actually finished with us this first year. So she says, you know, my first year gave me confidence and helped me to grow with my passion. It guided me in communicating my design ideas with others, which I didn't know how to express. This is super common. Often students will say, I've got really great ideas, but they're kind of stuck in my head. I can kind of see it, but I don't know how to communicate it. That's what Ben and I are super good. We can say we're super good at that. We know
Super good at that.
we know how to help you to begin to express those ideas. So she said, you know, I learned this how to develop my ideas through different methods like sketching and model making. But fundamentally, it was pleasant to discover that many people with the same mindset understood each other's ideas and have these common interests, these common passions. I chose this course because in the future, I hope to work in a profession that I am passionate about and in which I can develop my creativity. Key thing there, that big word is passion. Anybody who's kind of in this industry, they live and breathe design. It's the thing that kind of consumes them. It's a 24-hour preoccupation within that. So that's really important. Key here, so it's a lot about working super hard. It's a lot about being really curious. We don't expect you to arrive at any of these skills. An open mind, ability to really want to work hard, and a super curious mind, the key things that you need. The rest of it we will teach you. Part of that is these skills, learning actually how to use orthographic projection. So these are about communicating with others. We can communicate through these systems of drawing, through model making, through photographing our models really carefully, but also doing these really simple visuals and rendering them with the real, you know, with a sense of what those real materials will be. We also always keep this model making going. It's key, it's fundamental. We find that often students can actually be much more imaginative and playful when they actually explore their ideas in 3 dimensions, that they're physically putting things together. They're understanding how things stand up and how to stop them kind of falling down. So you, rather than sitting there studying a textbook or listening to a lecture, they kind of learn this through their fingertips. And as a result of that, and by carefully photographing their work, they can really begin to imagine what it would actually be like to be within this space. But then they need to take that information and communicate it accurately, because at some point they would be handing that information on to somebody else to actually build it. So therefore they need to know certain conventions. It's a bit like we're all speaking the same language. If all designers understand these conventions, and so we want to teach you that language. That means that anybody can then begin to look at this drawing and I can say, okay, I understand there's a doorway there. I can understand which way that doorway is entering. I know I can then actually begin to walk into this space and walk around these structures. Oops, I can find another doorway there. I can know that I can go into this space. I can actually begin to see somebody sitting there within this space, sitting at their desk. I can see somebody else is about to walk into that space. So by having these conventions of a language, we all can talk to each other. I can give you this drawing and you'd know what was actually happening in that space. But other times we try to actually make it a little bit more explicit, or we want to actually communicate what it really emotionally feels like to be within the space. Things like the lighting are really, really important. They give a real sense of what that person feels like when they're sitting at their desk with this light coming down on them. They've got a tiny little desk light there as well that they can angle round just to actually move around their space. But this whole space has got a fantastic copper lining to it, so we can begin to feel the richness of that materiality as well within that space. So we will teach you how to actually get into your drawings all these fantastic qualities. But within that, obviously, you're beginning to make those choices. So again, you can see here that we start from the simple model making, where you can begin to think, what's it like to enter into this space? But then by taking that drawing into the conventions or simple visuals, we can then begin to apply and overlay these much more rich and tactile materials to think, what's it like walking in on this reflective floor? What's it like to walk past this marble wall and feel the weight and the sensation of that wall as we're actually walking into that space? So, these are the kind of things that we're talking about the whole time. What does that person feel like? What impact does this marble slab have on their experience of walking into that space? Hence, that's why what I mean about the psychology of spaces. We're thinking here, why do we change from using steel at this point to beginning to use like the blue sea stone? Everything we do has a kind of meaning. We're embedding meaningful decisions within our actual design process. It's not just actually about what kind of looks nice or what do we think, we kind of fancy using within that space. We're much more considering this person. We're kind of having empathy for this person. We're wanting to know what's going to make them really look in a focused way at this object. What impact does this big metal column actually have to the way that they approach that object? So this is why we talk about sculpting space and manipulating their sense of walking through that space. If you're super ambitious, the more ambitious you are, the more that Ben and I are going to push you, because there's a great amount within this discipline to actually learn. It's super exciting discipline. The harder you work, the further you can travel within the first year. There's absolutely no limits. We don't say, okay, no, your first year, this is as far as you go. We actually say your first year, we're going to really keep stretching you. So you can see here that we then begin to almost pull apart the spaces and really think about the intricacies of where that staircase actually sits, how it wraps around that wall, how this ceiling comes over the top and encloses and compresses that ceiling. What is the view out of this space? We begin to look much more into the detail. What's it like to cross over this glass bridge? What's it like for this person sitting here and seeing this waterfall coming down through the space? What about that person? What are they looking at? They're looking at this detail, the way that they've hidden away these little moments of surprise within the space. Equally, again, it's a bit like we zoom in. We're zooming in and out of spaces. We're looking at intimate moments of looking up underneath the floor and actually saying, how can we articulate that space? But equally, what's it going to feel like to walk up this timber, dark bog oak floor? So we're getting quite specific now. We're saying that not only it's not just a wooden floor, but it's a dark oak floor that's actually been finished in a specific darkened way that relates to that space. It's cantilevering from this concrete beam, so we're looking carefully at the structure within that. When we can't fully work it out in drawings, we go back to the model making, and then we might actually model it in a more detailed way. Here you can see this student is looking right down to tiny little details, looking at the materiality of the cork. She's looking at the way she can actually reflect light through this green material to create this sort of almost halo effect on the floor, because she's trying to create this really special moment of display within that. She then takes the information that she's learned from that again back into the orthographics, into this language of communication. So she could hand this to somebody then to actually make it for her. And that person would know that they could actually use aluminium clamps and that join to a plate. But they could look here and say, okay, yeah, I need this aluminium mesh, and it's actually joining at this rail. So they've got all that information and all of that detail. And finally, we celebrate everything that all of the students actually bring to this course. They come from many different backgrounds, lots of different disciplines, lots of different cultures, and we encourage the students to kind of bring that. This final project is actually a student that we're really celebrating out of the whole of UK. They are now actually in the final selection of being put forward to the Interior Educators exhibition that's about to take place in July at the Oxo Tower. So look out for it, it's going to be there. What they're actually doing is designing an exhibition space. They're looking to the future, they're looking towards new technologies, but at the same time with a nod to the sort of history of architecture, the history of historical forms. How can they sit those two sort of languages together? This idea of looking at digital printing. People are now digital printing buildings, no longer just small artifacts, but whole spaces. So you can see actually how this space would emerge over the period of 6 weeks. And so the exhibition would be constantly evolving. And you can see again, he's going down to these really fine details. He's communicating to somebody. This is actually how you're going to put it all together. But fundamentally, what's key is how that person feels when they're within that space. So just to finish on a final quote from a student, so I'm then going to stop talking, but it says, this first year for me has been about being quite challenging, but also very stimulating and productive. I can say that it truly has been an amazing, evolving experience. The course is well structured. The modules and projects were all diverse and interesting. I think that the whole program is designed in a way that little by little boosts and strengthens your confidence and skills, taking you out of your comfort zone. It won't always be easy. It's not an easy course. And challenging your judgment and critical thinking, giving you the tools to think and design and do more and more professionally after each submission. So fundamentally, it's about looking forward. It's about looking outwards, looking to what the future of interiors will be, now more than ever, on this note. Okay, and at that point, I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Ben.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rebecca. I think that's a really good sort of introduction to it all. So as Rebecca's sort of been talking about as we're going through there, we kind of rely on a lot of tools to do our jobs as interiors people. And when we sort of talk about tools, you know, we think in this normal way as designers, our biggest strength is our imagination, as Rebecca's touched on already, and our ability to think critically. That's really important. But we are driven by a continuous sense of curiosity. That word curiosity we'll hear a lot as we talk about things as we go through. And as you can see, we rely on a series of tools to help us generate and exploit these ideas. Okay, so whether it's a pencil or a computer, we need to sort of get these ideas out of your head, like Rebecca was talking about earlier. Okay, so importantly, we can communicate these ideas to other people, because essentially our ideas are never any good to us in our heads. They might keep us happy, but we need to get those out. We need to show them to somebody else and go, what do you think? Can we make this better? And you know, whether that's another designer or whether you're talking to a builder or a contractor, you need to get those across in some way, because like Rebecca says, we don't have that fortune of being able to make a building and go, what do you think? We have to think up ahead and sort of pitch them ideas in our way. Our tools are not always physical, like a pencil or a pen. Some of our tools are strategies, skills, or approaches we use. So these are some of the things that we sort of teach you as we go forwards. It's not always just about how you use the kind of a pencil or you use a computer, but it's knowing the ins and outs of them and what they can achieve and how you can use them. What's the best strategy? What's the best order? What's the best sequence to sort of deploy these things in? Okay, so let's put it in real simple terms. When you have a job to do, you need the right tools. Okay, different jobs require different tools and knowledge to use them efficiently or effectively. Often we don't know what a job will be. So we need to be prepared. This is why we build ourselves toolkits. And this is exactly the same for us as designers. Okay, you will probably have a physical toolkit like this one, perhaps a pencil case. We're all familiar with those, hopefully. You've got pens and pencils and scalpels and rulers and everything else, and USB sticks these days, or it's USB now, I think, isn't it? Apple keep driving that forwards. But you can also be considered as a metaphorical pencil case in this role. You didn't think you would get called a pencil case today, did you? But our job is kind of to help you find the right tools to put into your pencil case, if you like, your metaphorical pencil case. These tools form the basis of what you need to take on a design project. Okay, so kind of everything we're feeding you over this first year is just building up a kind of, you know, a really healthy kit of options for you that you can sort of take into a project and use at the right time. But don't worry, we won't drop them all on you at once. We build them up slowly. We'll introduce you to a number of different tools to add to your toolkit. So this is kind of a sequence of various bits and bobs that we'll sort of see through the year. There's things about measuring, there's things about drawing, there's things about display, things about presentation, things about researching and everything else as we go through. So yeah, we'll have some of these tools. We'll go, right, well, that would be great for researching. I need to go and measure this thing. I might need to go and sketch something. I might need to experiment with some material at this stage of research. It can take on many forms, research. Importantly, as Rebecca mentioned already, we analyze everything. That is what we do as designers. We cannot help ourselves. Myself and my wife, we're both designers. We go to a restaurant, we're a nightmare. She's a graphic designer. She'd pull apart the menu and say, oh, look at the font on this. I'm looking at the lighting going, that's too much. We're awful to take for dinner. Never take us for dinner. Anyway. We analyze everything, we explore things all the time. We say that word curiosity, we always want to explore with those people. Perhaps you're that person, perhaps you're that really imaginative person that's just constantly daydreaming like me out the window going, oh, I wonder if we could do that. And with that, we want to go and explore it. We want to see if it's possible. We want to try it. And that's kind of a continuous sort of presence in a designer, if you like, and testing it. And once you've got the idea, you want to start testing it and seeing, is it possible? Can I do that? And to do that, we use model making. We kind of play with physical things. We test things digitally, and we play around with all sorts of mechanisms. And as Rebecca suggested, it's not the same for everybody, which is why we build you this toolkit, so you can choose which tool you use when. And we won't tell you. We'll say, well, this is good for that. But you might say, well, actually, I want to make a model of this, or maybe I want to digitally collage this particular element. So it kind of, it puts the control completely back in your sort of court, if you like. And importantly, communication, that's what we do. Designers, we communicate all the time. We have to sort of show what is possible. Because often we'll be talking to people that aren't designers, that people perhaps that aren't as imaginative or can't quite see it in their heads the same way that we can. I think we're slightly different designers in that way. So therefore, we need to be able to show them. And for that, we'll use all sorts of skills. In this case, we use a huge amount of software, as well as kind of modeling and sketching and everything else. Software-wise, we use the Adobe Creative Suite, which you get for free in first year. Wow. Well, in fact, across the course, I think it is, Rebecca, isn't it? So we'll give you access to all these programs, InDesign, Photoshop, you might have come across, of course, and Illustrator and Acrobat and everything else. We'll also introduce you to programs for CAD software. CAD, I should explain, is computer-aided design, which is generally used for drawing. So we use programs like Vectorworks, which is great for kind of orthographic drawing that Rebecca was talking about earlier. So when we're doing plans and sections or exploded axonometrics. We might even touch on some Cinema 4D in the first year, but usually that comes towards sort of second year, but it's about sort of 3D modeling software, which is a fantastic program as well. So we really will bundle all of these skills up for you. So you've kind of got a really good grounding in these. And the idea is you kind of come through first year with sort of feeling really quite confident in these skills. So you know, right, I've got it in the bag now. I can really go on and take on my second and final year and impress everybody with what I've got. That's kind of what we hope sort of for you to get to, if you like. I should mention as well, the reason we kind of choose these programs is always we've got our eye, myself and Rebecca, we're both professionals as well. We're keeping our eye on that professional world. We want to sort of match up with it. So, you know, ultimately you want to hopefully find employment in the working world of interiors after this. And that's what we know universities for. So what's the point in teaching you programs that you wouldn't perhaps come across in the real world? So we're always looking at practice. We're saying, okay, what aligns with you? What do you want them to learn? So that way you're getting it sort of firsthand, if you like, and you'll feel confident going into the working world, hopefully afterwards. It's a good way of thinking about tools in a modern context, if you like. Think about apps on your phone and how you would use different combinations of apps to deal with a different problem, okay? So obviously that's a very complex one, isn't it? Let's simplify that. So let's say, for example, if I had a problem, a nice problem of visiting a museum with a friend, let's say Rebecca, Rebecca's my friend in London, I would use various apps to successfully achieve that. Of course I would. Nobody works in the real world anymore, so it's all digital. So I'd go, right, okay, when's the next train? I'd check my train app and sort of go, right, okay, I can get a train from there, get into London. I'd go and check out the Tate Moderns app and see what exhibitions are on. I'd, of course, WhatsApp Rebecca saying, what time's your train getting in so I can meet you? I'd be checking the time on my clock. So I sort of go, oh yeah, no, I need to run now. I've got to get that train. I'd be checking my Google Maps to see which way is the quickest way to get to the station. I'd kind of have my Spotify on, listening to Taylor Swift all the way, of course, I love it. And then I have my Instagram app so I can sort of document the day, take photographs of things I'm seeing. I think about somewhere for lunch, of course, and you know, how do I go and pay for that? Everything's kind of moving that way in the working world, isn't it? And also how I pay for things as well now. We even pay for things on our phones. So these are kind of all tools that we kind of use in an everyday sense. Okay, and as with all apps, you need to know how each one works to be able to operate effectively. So you can make the decisions and so you can sort of understand which one to use at the right time. And that's exactly what we're kind of trying to teach you over that first year, is kind of showing you all the possibilities, if you like. And then you can sort of take control of the apps. You can say, well, actually, I need this app to achieve that, and so on. Okay, of course, we always take our sketchbook and pencil as well. I mean, we're always sketching. No matter how good computers get, we always love to sketch, and it's an important skill. Although we have physical tools to help, we also need to learn how to think, understanding the combinations of tools available to us and when is best to deploy each one. So that's exactly what I'm talking about right now. And say, you'll get familiar with that and you'll be sat there thinking, okay, yeah, well, I could try a digital collage there, or perhaps actually if I need to just talk to Rebecca, perhaps if I sketch it quickly, that's the quickest way to show her what I mean. So it's just understanding the ins and outs of each one and what's possible. Okay, as with all tools, there are fundamental things you need to start. Of course, you know, pencil sketching is a good way to start, but with experience and practice, you'll keep adding to your toolkit, your metaphorical toolkit over time, and you'll soon be achieving wonderful things like this, which is a kind of section which is showing us atmosphere and qualities of the space. Okay, we'll show you tools for research and analysis, how to kind of pick and choose things. We'll kind of continue keeping up with current trends, what's out there, and we'll show you the right places to go and look for those things. And then importantly, really analyze them, question each one in detail and sort of go through it and say, what's that doing? Why is that so great? Why do I love that image so much? And as soon as you start extracting those ingredients, it's amazing then how you can transform that and move forwards with something. We'll show you tools for exploring through sketching. So say, as good as computers are, they're fantastic tools. Nothing is more instantaneous and quick than picking up a pencil and sketching what you mean. And that's often and always, in fact, how we start as designers. We'll always start with a pencil or a model or something physical because it's immediate, it's quick and it's fast, and we can show exactly what we're thinking and moving with. Okay, we'll show you tools for generating ideas through conceptual model making. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you don't pick a pencil up, perhaps you pick up some materials and go, right, I'm just going to start playing around with this. I'm going to see what happens if I do this. All the time using that analysis to question each move you're making. Taking lots of photographs. That's the beauty of our phones these days. We can take really loads of photographs and check what's going on all the time. So yeah, quick model making for conceptual thought. We'll show you tools for exploring ideas through collage. So taking a kind of a photograph from somewhere and then adding elements to it with sort of Photoshop or even physical collage sometimes. Start showing kind of what you mean, expressing the qualities of the space. This image here, we can sort of see exactly what's going on. There's kind of this new insertion in the outdoor space. There's steam rising up out of it. I can see the words tea on the side. I'm starting to think, oh, okay, so what are the green leaves then? Are they something to do with the tea? So instantly it's telling me a story, this one image. I can really read into it and understand it. So we'll give you those skills as well. We'll show you how to do that. Okay, we'll show you tools for controlling your process and thinking through iterative making. So again, making, it's so important because it really helps drive ideas. You can find things by doing that and photographing them, thinking about the light qualities and everything else. Okay, we'll show you tools for developing ideas, learning to communicate designs through accuracy and drawing conventions. So this is where we kind of get into more computer-aided design, perhaps. So in this case, Vectorworks is one of the programs we use. And this is where you can really start thinking about the details. You might have had the bigger idea, but now we can do that thing that Rebecca was talking about, zooming in and saying, well, actually, what is that measurement? And can a person fit through there? What's going to be the best angle for that and everything else? And we'll show you how to start using that. Okay, we'll show you tools for graphically communicating spatial design, because the drawings are all very nice, aren't they? The orthographic drawings, they show us measurements and everything else. But here we take them a stage further and start showing atmosphere and light conditions and quality and everything else you might experience in that space. What does it feel to be this little fellow under here, just looking up going, wow, there's a really big void above me. What's that light coming down on him feel like? Okay, we'll show you tools for visualizing in 3 dimensions, moments and these little moments you find around a scheme and saying, communicating those atmospheric qualities of space. This is where it kind of goes a stage further almost. It goes beyond something to say it is a little personal moment, isn't it? See this guy sat here just looking at these kind of objects ahead of him. That must be a magical little moment in that space, the kind of light condition coming down. It's almost quite poetic, it's quite lovely. Okay, so I think that kind of wraps up that part of things. I'm just going to show you this little video as well. This kind of shows you kind of some of the skills and how we build one of those visuals, if you like, and just sort of the different steps that we'll take along the way. So we kind of, build it up in layers. It's much like a physical collage. But again, we'll show you all these techniques, how you select good materials that kind of go together. We'll talk about things that work well, how we bring light and shadow in, and kind of how we add the sort of tone and think about where the conditions are. What kind of atmosphere do you want to create? And what's important in the space? What gets priority graphically? And what are all the little details that people need to see? Okay, so we will kind of show you those techniques as we go along. Excellent, right. I think, Rebecca, I'm going to finish up on our lovely Instagram page. And this moment, hopefully we've said far too much as always. Me and Rebecca, we cannot shut up. We apologise for that. But we would love to hear any questions you guys might have. This is our Instagram account. Please do go and have a little look through. You've got all the current students and their amazing work they're producing. It's a good time of year for you guys to be tuning into us because all the final years have just finished. But there's a mixture here of kind of first, second and final year. And Rebecca says, all the things we've shown you have been first year examples. But actually you will get there as well, and don't feel overwhelmed by any of that. And that's our job, to kind of help you get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And often students kind of ask, what skills do I actually need before I start on this course? What do I need to have in my portfolio? What do I need to prove? To be really clear with you, the most important thing is an investigative and curious mind. And fundamentally being willing and wanting to learn and to work hard. It's not an easy course, it's an ambitious course. You will learn a huge amount through it. But actually students that really become passionate about their subject, they get picked up straight from degree show and go straight into actual practice. And so you can actually have a fantastic career from this subject, direct from your degree. So it's about actually wanting to learn, wanting to be curious and find out what it's really like to be manipulating and articulating and curating different spaces.
Absolutely. Okay, so I don't know if anyone's got any questions. Gabriel, are you still with us?
Yes. Hello. So I actually have a question. Okay. So what would you say is the most important skill to have to succeed in the course, really?
I think primarily it is curiosity. It is that curiosity and that sense of being prepared to work hard and learn hard.
Mhm.
Because we don't expect you to arrive with any of these skills. And these are all the skills that we will actually teach you with. I think that you need to be wanting to be learning to question things. Um, we have students from so many different backgrounds. That, really in terms of this discipline, we've had students come to us from having done geography A level. They've not necessarily been studying an art-based subject prior to joining us, but they're interested in the way that people live in spaces, how they live in cities. And so they come from that sort of sense of inquiry. And then obviously all of the model making and the drawing and the sketching and that understanding when to use certain colors, when to use certain textures. That's all what we'll teach you. Yeah.
Just to add to that, I think, yeah, Rebecca's absolutely right. Don't sort of feel daunted in any way that, oh, I haven't got that skill, because that is the point. That is why you would be coming to us. You might be fantastic artists at school, or you've kind of really enjoyed that class. You might not have any art-based subject, but you just love sketching, or you love taking photographs of buildings, or you actually like making, perhaps, whatever it is. You could be a brilliant designer potentially. I think it's just sort of recognizing that in yourself. I had a very wise boss many years ago, this before I was a designer, and she turned around and said to me, Ben, you realise you spend about 75% of your life working as a human being. And I thought, whoa, blimey, 75%. And she goes, you better make sure you do something you love. And I'm like, you've got a good point. I handed in my resignation the next week and I went off to Middlesex to join, and I studied there as well. So it kind of really changed my life as well. And I think it's such an important thing to do. Be passionate about what you do and recognise what you love.
Yeah. And I think obviously, if you're somebody who's a people watcher, that you're really, interested in seeing people move through space or reacting to a space, or sort of inevitably there are things that are, it's about people. You need to want to actually design for people. It's, I think that's the key thing. It's coming, we could actually call, there's a certain phrase, it's called human-centered design. It's this thing of taking people as your starting point and then actually working out is the key thing.
Mm-hmm. We did have one exception to that a couple of years ago. Final year, designed something for cats, but it was ultimately for people to meet cats.
Oh, that sounds like a brilliant concept.
It was fun.
Am I okay to ask one more question?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So how would you describe today's job market in terms of career prospects, especially for those students who are, potentially coming to Middlesex and working in London, for example?
Well, I think that what's really quite interesting about the job markets in terms of interiors is that it is international, particularly in terms of actually being online. We're finding that, the more digitally based we become, you're finding that designers don't necessarily need to be based in the space in which they're designing for. So it's actually become much more international and much more fluid. Inevitably, the post-pandemic of this COVID period, the way that we design interiors is going to be even more significant, because the point we made earlier is that we're going to be spending even more time inside spaces. We're spending less time traveling. So actually the interiors of spaces have never become even more significant. There's going to be a huge building boom that's already starting, which is about reinvesting in the future of what spaces will actually be. So the job markets are very buoyant. There's a big prediction for it to be very buoyant.
Yes, I had a friend famously say to me, but you sort of do interior architecture, don't buildings get built and then they're done? And I sort of said, well, no, actually, we're a little bit more like interior, to put it in context, we've got a bit more like hairdressers. You get your hair cut every month, don't you? And interiors are the same. They change all the time. They're continually developing. They're becoming new spaces all the time. As Rebecca's just touched on with the pandemic, we're now questioning what offices are going to be in the future.
Absolutely.
And actually, that's where we're all going to be called upon. And people are going to say, well, what do we do with this space now? What does it become? And that's what's really exciting about our job. It's continually moving. There's always things happening. And there's always a big call for it.
And I mean, on that note of the offices, what's really interesting is that office spaces are having to really evolve. They're no longer about desks lined up with computers on them. They're actually beginning to introduce plants and sofas and coffee tables and sort of social activities. Offices of the future are actually going to be much more about people meeting to work collaboratively. And actually being much more fun places and bouncing ideas and sort of creative thinking spaces, rather than they are about a very sort of static occupancy of a desk. So yeah, things are seriously changing. Restaurants are going to be changing. Shops definitely are really evolving. They're going to have to evolve in order to compete with the online market. So yeah, it's a really interesting time to be in interiors, I think.
Agreed.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's so interesting to actually hear from your perspective, because I hadn't really thought about how offices, for example, would be changing after the
Yeah,
pandemic.
they're going to be changing hugely.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Which
Brilliant.
then impact out onto the city inevitably as well.
Of course. And I imagine the home interiors as well might change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, incredible.
Mhm.
We don't have any more questions, I believe. But this is all that we have time for today.
Okay, well, it's been great. Thank you very much for inviting us along, and it's been great to talk to you. And I hope that you've found something that sort of kind of ignites a little bit of interest within you. So do go to our Instagram page and, you know, look at it in a little bit more depth about interiors at Middlesex. We do actually have 3 programs that actually run there. There is the interior architecture program, the interiors, and the MA interior architecture. So please do go on our website and have a look at a little bit more detail, or equally, you know, we're always happy for people to email us direct if you've got any further queries on anything.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Ben and Rebecca, thank you very much for your very insightful presentations and for your time. Thank you everyone who joined us today, and keep an eye on the next events as well. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.